This video series is funded by Jewish Hospital Foundation, Norton Healthcare, and the United States Surgical Corporation. This tape shows the internal organs of the thorax and of the abdomen, and the male and female reproductive organs. In this first section, we'll look at the organs of the thorax. First the heart, then the lungs. We'll also look briefly at the esophagus. The thorax itself, the upper part of the trunk which contains the heart and lungs, is shown in tape 3 of this atlas. Here we're looking at the contents. To understand the heart, we'll begin by seeing where it is. We tend to put the heart here in our imagination, but in reality, it's much closer to the midline. Seen from in front, the heart is here. It lies behind the sternum and directly above the diaphragm. Seen from the side, the heart is here, occupying almost all the space between the vertebral bodies behind and the sternum in front. When the diaphragm moves, the heart moves with it. To get our first look at the heart, we'll start by removing the upper extremities and all the shoulder muscles that surround the upper thorax, so as to leave just the thorax itself, enclosed by the ribs and intercostal muscles. Then we'll remove this part of the rib cage on each side, revealing the lungs, which are fully inflated here. When we let the lungs deflate, we can see the heart behind the sternum, contained within its protective jacket of pericardium. To see it better, we'll take the lungs, the sternum, and the pericardium out of the picture. This is the heart. This is the diaphragm. The major blood vessels that lead into and out of the heart take up almost as much space as the heart itself. Now that we've seen where the heart is, we'll take a detailed look at it. We'll look at its 4 chambers and its 4 valves. Then we'll look at the great vessels that enter and leave the heart, and lastly, we'll look at the coronary arteries. Because we so often see simplified diagrams of the heart like this, we tend to think the atria, the inlet chambers, are above, and the ventricles, the pumping chambers, are below. It's perhaps surprising to see that in reality, the atria aren't above the ventricles, they're behind them. Here's the heart in isolation. Here are the ventricles in front. Here are the atria behind. This generous coating of epicardial fat makes it hard to see the 4 chambers distinctly. To see them more clearly, we'll go to a heart in which almost all the fat has been removed. In this specimen, all 4 chambers have been distended with equal pressure, making the atria somewhat larger than normal. This is a directly posterior view of the heart. This is a directly anterior view. The massive thick-walled left ventricle projects forward and to the left. The thinner-walled right ventricle is partially wrapped around the left one. We'll see the ventricles by themselves in a minute. For now, let's go round to the back and look at the 2 atria. This is the left atrium. This is the right atrium. Blood coming from the upper part of the body enters the right atrium by way of the superior vena cava. Blood coming from the lower part of the body enters it by way of the much larger inferior vena cava. In a more intact dissection, here's the inferior vena cava coming up through the diaphragm and almost immediately entering the right atrium. In addition to the two venae cavae, blood from the heart itself enters the right atrium under here by way of the coronary sinus, which we'll see later. From the upper part of the right atrium, this blind pouch, the right auricle or atrial appendage, projects forwards. The thin wall of the right atrium is formed largely of muscle. When the atrium contracts in diastole, the blood in it passes forwards into the right ventricle through the right atrioventricular valve or tricuspid valve, which is here. The left atrium and the right atrium are in contact here, where they share a common wall, the interatrial septum, which lies quite obliquely. To look at the inside of the right atrium,